So, I'm here with Bob Cooney, the man who needs no introduction, the man that basically everyone knows in this entire industry. So, when I started working in VR, when I was new to the industry, everyone just kept telling me about Bob Cooney, and I'm like, who is this guy? We got introduced. Now I'd say we are not just colleagues. We're friends. I keep seeing you, in every city around the world. We keep bumping into each other, so that's fantastic. But anyways, Bob Cooney is the LBE VR expert. He knows everything about the industry, and he's a consultant. He's a speaker. He's an author. Love your book. So Bob, I just wanted to kind of ask you a few questions because we're coming into the big expo in Las Vegas, the amusement expo. Before that, we have the VR Arcade Summit, which is going to be fantastic as well. But having worked in LBE VR for more than anyone else, like what are the major trends coming up to this expo in the industry?
Yeah, great question. I think the biggest trend you can see here, we're in this big 2,000 square foot, 200 square meter tracked free roam space. And I think that, for VR arcades, it started out with lots of like little 10 by 10 booths that people would go in and play single player games or maybe a multiplayer game with somebody in another booth. But people want to play together. And especially post-pandemic, I think people really want to come back together in a physical way. And so free roam VR enables that. And I think some of the new technology with Wi-Fi 6E streaming, you don't need backpacks anymore. You just put on a headset and you're in the game. And so people like to play shoulder to shoulder and know they're in a space with each other and hear each other. And even though you don't see necessarily the physical form of the other player, you see the avatar of that player. And it just gives you a surprisingly good sense of presence, even though it's not real. And so I think free roam is the future. It's something people won't be able to do at home. They don't have the space. They're not going to have 6 people all with the same headsets coming over at the same time to play a game. And so I think free roam is definitely the future of VR arcades. And we're seeing more and more arcades just kind of move from single player over to multiplayer free roam.
Fantastic. And Bob, I wanted to ask you as well. So, I mean, you've obviously probably tested out all manner of different headsets. They come and go to the market. What about when it comes to actually like the headsets themselves? Which headset would you find to be the most convenient for operators? Which is the most user-friendly? Can you tell me a bit more about that? I can just hold this.
Yeah, cool. So, look, there's 3 headsets on the market. There's the Quest, there's the Pico, and then there's the HTC Focus 3, and I think you can look at them as kind of like entry-level, mid-level, and enterprise. I think the Quest is the most affordable. You can get a Quest 2 now for $200. You can get a Quest 3 for $500. The Pico has a couple of different. The Neo 3 is about $500, Neo 3 Enterprise. Then they have a Neo 4, which is a bit higher resolution, which is maybe $800, and then the Focus 3 is like $1,200 or $1,300. And so, look, I always recommend the Focus 3 to operators. I think it's designed as an enterprise system. It's got a software suite that allows you to make it really easy to operate. You set it up once and it just goes. A lot of people like the Quest as the entry level because of the price point, and I think you save money on your CapEx up front. You're going to have more operational expense just running it, keeping it calibrated, and your technical support probably needs to be a little bit higher. And then Pico's really good for mobile systems. Like if you're going to take VR around to different locations, Pico seems to be kind of like in that middle of the road play. But if I had to give you a really simple overview of the headset landscape, that's probably how I would frame it.
And in the year 2024, what are the 3 things that you would say operators are looking for right now?
That's a really good question. I think that look, it's always ROI, return on investment, right? And I think now with, free roam, when I started with free roam with zero latency in 2016, it was, almost $1 million to set up a 8-player, 200 square meter free roam setup. And, now you can do that for, 1/100th of the cost of that, like almost. So it's like it's come down at least 90%. And so I think the ROI now is there for operators to do, whether it's PC VR on the high end or using these all-in-one or standalone headsets on the lower end. You can get into this for, thousands or a few tens of thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the ROI equation's there. I think the operational ease is we're still working on that. It's still, using a lot of consumer electronics equipment in a commercial environment. Reliability can still be a challenge, like they get dropped, their kids running around with computers, right? And I think that, I think that all operators that I talk to like variety of content. They like to have freedom of choice. And in the early days, you would be locked into one provider and you would be beholden to them to deliver content to you as an operator. And now that the landscape is standardizing around different headsets, and a lot of the software games are being abstracted from the hardware platforms and the software platforms now. And so you can kind of run multiple systems on one headset and get different games from different developers. So it's giving them more choice, which I think will increase adoption of free roam VR across the landscape. So those would probably be the three things I'd see right now.
Cool, fantastic. And well, kind of relating to that, what are some of the mistakes that operators are making, when they start up a game zone? Because I read in your handbook, the DIY, just fantastic release, that they're obviously sometimes making some mistakes upon, because there's so much to choose from, as you mentioned. And what would you recommend? Like, what are those mistakes, and what would you recommend they do? Obviously in a summarized answer, to kind of make this a lot more smoother, so that they ensure success.
Yeah, I think one of the big ones is now that you can kind of DIY it or do it yourself, there's a trend to really go on too cheap on the low end. Like this is a beautiful store. There's a storefront in a high-end shopping mall. There's two entrances. You walk in. There's a lobby. There's beautiful lighting. There's murals on the wall. It really looks attractive. And I've seen some people where they just take like rope stanchions to cordon off a space and put some masking tape on the floor for markers, and they turn that into a free roam space, and it just, when nobody's playing, it looks broken. And so I think you have to build an attraction. When you're in a mall, you build a storefront. If you're in an arcade, make it look good. Like, take the extra effort to make it look as cool as it is for the players. Because if you're not a player, you're just watching people run around with headsets and look kind of goofy, and you have no idea that they're experiencing this fantastic world that only exists in virtual reality. And so I think that's the biggest mistake I see people make is not spending enough effort, time, and money on preparing the space to look great. And I think that's probably the biggest mistake. And underfunded. Like, they go in underfunded. Not enough money for marketing, not enough money for build out. It's more expensive than you probably think it is to get up and running, and it's going to take a lot more labor than you probably think it's going to take. So those are probably a couple of areas to pay attention to.
Fantastic. And Bob, well, as a last question, this more kind of relates to you and your schedule at the Amusement Expo. So you're going to be speaking, you're going to be moderating at some of these events. What's your schedule? What are you going to be doing there? How can someone from the street come and see you? Because you're a celebrity.
Big fish in a small pond. So the VR Arcade Summit, you can go to vrarcadesummit.com to see the agenda. It's in Las Vegas. This is the 8th year we've done it. There'll be probably 500 attendees, and we've got 40 or so speakers over 2 days. We try to cover kind of some of the nuts and bolts of the arcade industry, as well as trends of what's coming, what to look for. I put together the conference. I started it 8 years ago, and so I kind of put together the agenda and the speakers, and I moderate most of the panels. And it's going to be super busy. We'll be recording all of the sessions. And so if you can't make it to Vegas, March 18th and 19th, then we'll just keep an eye on the website at vrarcadesummit.com, and we'll record the sessions and we'll post them as podcasts sometime coming up in April.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for your time. As always, a pleasure speaking to you. I'm going to be speaking to you more at the Amusement Expo myself, so I'm going to be at Vegas for a couple of days for the VR Arcade Summit, and of course for the big show at the Amusement Expo. I'm going to be there as a representative for ANVIO, but of course I'm going to be checking out some other products, learn more about the industry, because at the end of the day we want to learn, we want to collaborate, we want to make sure that everyone thrives. But so Bob, thank you so much again. And great to see you again. Thank you.
Good to see you, man.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks.